Hello, good evening. How are you tonight? Just waiting for a few people to drop into the stream. I'm Hetz. This is the Daily Faded. I'm happy to see you tonight. I hope you will smoke something or drink something along with me to ease the tension of the day. You remember that whole thing when you were in high school and they said that you shouldn't use alcohol or drugs to numb yourself to life's problems? That was incorrect. That was propaganda. Now, you shouldn't use it too much, don't get me wrong, but there are times when it's worth having a drink, and there are times when it's worth chilling out. So, plenty of things to talk about tonight. We had the excuse me, we had the highest death toll so far from COVID-19 yesterday. Sorry, stoner's cough. There are 2.178 million cases confirmed worldwide, 145,000 plus deceased worldwide, which is up almost 5% from yesterday. The United States is up over 6% from yesterday, and we're at 34,522. We have 675,000 plus cases. Wow, and in California, we had a bad day. We were up 9.83% in deaths to 949 deaths. If you look at the states, New York is only up 3.9% in deaths. New Jersey is up over 11% in deaths. Massachusetts is up over 12% in deaths. Michigan is up almost 9%. Pennsylvania is up almost 7.5%. California, almost 10%. Illinois, up 13%. Florida, up almost 9%. Connecticut, over almost 12%. Maryland, over 12%. Indiana, almost 9.5%. That's the death rate from yesterday. I bring all that up because the Trump administration is talking about this thing as if it's almost over. Trump comes out for Trumpaganda time and does a victory lap about what a great job they've done and how many lives they've saved. Yesterday saw the highest death toll yet. 2,400 died yesterday in the United States. That's 100 people an hour dying. That's a lot of people. I'm going to start with Trump today because there's a lot to say about Trump today. He was having trouble speaking. He busted out the 2.2 million line again, bragged that we're under the numbers in the model. So tone deaf with thousands dying every day to come out and brag about how we're doing such a good job and how the numbers are getting better. And we could have 2 or 3 more waves of this coming. So we're at almost 35,000 and we're not even through the first wave yet. We could easily hit 100,000. Easily. Not that I want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. I want this thing to go away, and I want it to go away for good. But it has to be pointed out that our president says things that, well, why am I saying what is obvious? Our president says things that don't jibe with the truth. He did some propaganda about how great our healthcare system is and how we've had much more successful outcomes than the rest of the world, when that is not true. Somebody responded to my tweet about the second wave. Somebody responded and said, can't you see on this chart, we're going to be less than 60,000. That's the problem with you liberals, is you can't understand facts, or something like that. And it was the chart of cases. And the worst line on that chart is the United States, because we have the most cases. So it's very likely we're going to have a second wave. There's nothing about that chart that says we're doing a good job. There's nothing about it. I believe the economy will boom, said Trump. I believe it will boom. It's going to go straight back up, he said, as if 22 million people. Ghetto bird. He talks about how great the economy is going to be, as if 22 million people haven't lost their jobs over the last 4 weeks. Went on and on about the greatest economy in history, the history of the world again. He said we'll have 3 phases in reopening. Different states will have different dates. We've passed the peak, he keeps saying. We've passed the peak. We may have passed the peak in new infections, that's true. But we haven't passed the peak in death, in the death toll yet. The death toll is still climbing every day. Even if look, you heard those percentages I just read. Those are not 2%. Those are not 3%. It's 8, 9, 10%. This is rich. There's a gradual reopening as cases go down in a state. They're going to allow states to remain closed if they believe to. Oh, thank you for your graciousness, Trump. Look, I think all these states that are going to open early are going to have massive second wave spikes. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want people to get sick. I don't want people to die. I hope I'm wrong, but they're going to have a second wave. Pence comes on, says we've lost 31,000 when we've lost 34,000. That number was the same at the time of the press conference as it is now. So I think that's completely irresponsible for the vice president to come out and say that 31,000 people have died when 34,000 people have died. Are they undercounting intentionally? They showed a tracker of influenza-like illnesses in the 50 states and said it represents COVID-19. And it shows the numbers going down 3 weeks in a row. It was a very confusing chart. I couldn't quite tell what I was looking at because it had the influenza lines on it and it had the COVID line on it. And they didn't explain how they know which line is which. Maybe it's just the testing. That would make sense. But I couldn't tell which line was which. So if you want a better description of that chart, you'll have to go elsewhere. I'm sure someone on YouTube has explained it. The criteria states have to have is they have to have a downward trajectory over 14 days in number of cases, number of deaths, number of hospitalizations, number of ICUs, I believe. And states have to demonstrate that they have sufficient capacity for a surge if there is a surge after they start to loosen restrictions. This all comes with strict recommendations for state preparedness, high levels of testing, and robust testing of healthcare workers. They say that, but we don't have the testing yet. We don't have it. There's no one out there saying, yeah, we have all the tests we need. And we, yeah. So, so Dr. Birx comes up to try and explain it a little bit more clearly because Pence was not doing such a good job. When you smoke, do you hold it in like that? Let it hang out in your lungs for a while and then exhale? Or do you smoke it, breathe in, and then breathe out like you're smoking a cigarette? Always a good question. So Dr. Birx comes out and starts talking about sentinel surveillance throughout nursing homes, indigenous communities, and communities of color, where every time in the nursing homes, they'll constantly be testing. And in all the community health centers, they'll constantly be testing. So it's just a surveillance program. You go to the doctor, we check you for COVID-19, which I think, by the way, is a very good idea. I don't think I don't know if there's any state in the country where it's realistic right now from a standpoint of having the tests. She said there are 1 million tests in the system that could be done that aren't getting done, and they're trying to figure out how to get them done. Again, I don't really necessarily know what that means, other than they're not getting it done. It's pretty clear that it means that. So it's a phased approach. There's a phase 2 and a phase 3, and I guess phase 4 would be back to normal. Have mitigation of resurgence. Every state has to have a plan for frontline workers and those living in congregant settings like nursing homes. Everyone has to continue to follow the hygiene guidelines, social distancing, and mask wearing. Businesses have to do social distancing, temperature checks, and necessary business travel, and they have to do a lot of disinfecting. These don't seem like very powerful guidelines to me. They really seem quite loose. To say businesses need to do social distancing, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that my table has a 6-foot radius around it? Because that's what social distancing would be. It would be 6 feet. How many restaurants are going to be able to survive with that few tables? And by the way, Trump comes out at the end and says all the restaurants, 150 tables before, they're going to have 150 tables after. He's such a dunce cap. He is an orange dunce cap. The most vulnerable must continue to shelter in place, maintain 6 feet of social distancing, avoid gatherings of people, or unnecessarily going out. They want to encourage teleworking. Closed schools should remain closed. Continue to prohibit visits to nursing homes. Gyms can open with strict disinfecting, elective surgeries on an outpatient basis. So that was phase 1. Phase 2, there's the same criteria of a 14-day decline in all those key statistics to get to phase 2. In phase 2, we can have 50 people gatherings and non-essential travel can resume. Bad idea. Bad idea. Really bad idea. Still encouraging telework. Consider special accommodations for vulnerable populations. Schools, daycares, and camps can reopen if you're in phase 2. Visits to nursing homes and hospitals are still prohibited. Large venues can operate under moderate physical distancing protocols. What a word salad that is. Large venues can operate under moderate physical distancing protocols. Does that mean I can go to a Dodgers game, but it's going to be 6 feet in every direction before there's another Dodgers fan? Is that how that's going to work? I don't understand. I don't understand that rule. It doesn't jibe. It doesn't make sense. I really don't see how you do the physical distancing and still have restaurants and parks and, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, obviously we're going to have to do it, so we're going to find out. But all that phase 2 stuff sounds very dangerous. But who knows? Maybe after 28 days, maybe I'm being overly pessimistic. Phase 3 was what Fauci sort of referred to as the new normal. Continuing good hygiene can resume public interactions, but should practice physical distancing. Low-risk populations should still minimize time spent in crowded environments. You hear that? In phase 3, low-risk populations, young people, healthy people, should minimize time spent in crowded environments. Still in phase 3. But in phase 3, you can resume unrestricted staffing of work sites. Well, some work sites are crowded environments. So these rules don't fit together. They don't complement each other. Finally, Dr. Fauci came out and said the predominant consideration in this plan is the health of the American public to make it as safe as possible. In order to get into the phasing, you have to pass a hurdle. Each hurdle for each phase is a safety check. The new normal is the new normal no matter what phase you're in, vis-a-vis social distancing, masks, etc. That's just the new normal. So we're all wearing masks forever. Or maybe just until there's a coronavirus vaccine. If there is a rebound in cases of any sort when you're going through these phases, then you have to resort to mitigation, they're saying. You have to be able to go backwards and start closing things down again. So Dr. Fauci says there will be crowds in sporting arenas again, but maybe not quite so packed in. And then Trump comes out and says, no, it's going to be fully packed to the gills. So don't listen to the doctor. Apparently, some states already meet the phase 2 guidelines and can go to phase 2 tomorrow. And that was some random low population states like Alaska and Montana. Yeah, and then that's the thing, as Trump keeps saying, relatively quickly we're going to get back to normal, where everyone's going to be at the Dodger game and the restaurant's going to have 150 tables. Relatively soon, we're going to get there. We're almost there. We can see the light. These are the things that he keeps repeating over and over again. And I definitely think there's this strong argument to not show these live. I definitely think there's a strong argument because it's just propaganda. Now, the details today were important, which is why I went through them all. But I think also, if you compare them to what we discussed about Gavin Newsom the other night, Gavin Newsom's agenda for how to reopen California is much more nuanced and a much more scientific and much more. It deals much more with the societal impacts of the pandemic in a way that nothing at all about what Trump and his cohort described today felt like it dealt with the societal impacts of the pandemic. It felt completely tone deaf, I mean, there were hints of things like, making sure that they expand testing in high risk populations. So there were hints of things that had to do with the societal impact, but it was really garbage, It was not well organized. The actual visuals themselves that they had on screen, the PowerPoint presentation, was less good than you get every day in Andrew Cuomo's thing and in Eric Garcetti's thing. 29 states are in the ball game, is what Trump said. So, look, I just can't say it enough. I think all this talk of reopening right now is insanity. We're closed until May 15th here in California. And I wouldn't pretend to prescribe to other states exactly that they have to be also closed until May 15th when they have considerably fewer cases. But it almost feels like they're getting people's hopes up when they start talking about the metrics for reopening things. And I went out today for an MRI. I had to go get an MRI on my back. And I had to go get groceries on the way home. And there were a lot of people out. There were a lot of cars on the street, much more so than last week. Much more people walking around than last week. And a lot of people on the sidewalks without masks. A lot of them. And I'm not one for conformity. I don't like being told what to do by the government. I don't like it at all. But I also understand science, and I don't think it's a question of whether or not you believe science. You hear people say all the time, well, we believe science, the other side doesn't believe science. But do you understand science? Because science doesn't really care about what you believe in or what you don't believe in. Science is not about belief. Science is not about having faith in something. That's where they get confused when they place science onto a faith continuum of not believing or believing. Well, there's no such thing as believing or not believing in science. Science is, and you either understand it or you don't. People do science and they get results, and you either understand them or you don't. So that's just my rant about science. I mean, it's one rant about science. I was watching the Soyuz space capsule um, disengage from the International Space Station on Twitter about an hour ago, and it was awesome. It was truly awesome. Oh, it was so beautiful. Amazing that you can just get notified on Twitter. There's some space action happening. I spent several years of my teenage years wanting to be an astronaut. So I love space stuff. Astronomy, I like astronomy. Astrophysics, I like astrophysics. Um, Now, by comparison, there's Gavin Newsom, and he brought on the head of the California Grocers Association and the head of the United Farm Workers. And they worked out a deal that in California, we're now providing 2 supplemental weeks of paid sick leave for workers with COVID-19 or in isolation due to exposure. This includes everyone from grocery stores and pickers to food service people like McDonald's. It's a huge deal. Includes delivery services and fast food restaurants. And it's supplemental insurance. So if for some reason, and in a lot of these jobs, they don't have any paid time off. If for some reason they do have paid time off already, they have a week of sick time, they can use that week of sick time, and then they can still use the 2 weeks supplemental sick time if they need it. So again, much like the $125 million going in relief aid to the undocumented in California, this is a more humane system. This is something that these people should have anyways, because all workers deserve rights, and these are basic fundamental rights. You know, um, you know how much sick leave you get in the United Kingdom? 365 days. Your company can't let you go for being sick too much. under 365 days of sick time. So you can basically be sick for a year and they have to keep you on the whole time. And yes, as long as we're going to rely on a private sector, as long as we're going to rely on capitalism, on the corporatocracy, as long as it's all about private, yes, space stuff. That includes Star Trek and Star Wars. But shit, now thank you, Undermarks. I totally lost my train of thought. I'm going to smoke some more. Gavin Newsom is demonstrating much more humane policy, is what I'm saying. Every day he comes out and he has something new that is a humane idea that that his team has thought of, and seeing the head of the California Grocers Association and the head of the Farm Workers Union speaking on screen together in solidarity. Bizarro. I wrote down a quote that Gavin Newsom said. He said, "It's incumbent on government to be there protecting the most vulnerable." I thought to myself, listen to that language. That is the perfect summation of progressivism. It's incumbent on government to be there protecting the most vulnerable. Now, that's not socialism. Not by a long, long shot is that socialism, but it is progressivism. Progressivism is that you treat people humanely, that you take care of people, and socialists and progressives have the same short-term goals for the most part, unless you're a truly revolutionary socialist who wants a real, humanism. Absolutely. Unless you're a socialist who wants like a radical revolution right now, like armed revolution in the streets and completely overthrow the means of production, unless you're that brand of socialism, then if you're more of a democratic socialist, then your short-term goals are in line with those who are seeking social democracy, with progressives. And that's why I do honestly think Gavin Newsom may be an interesting candidate in 2024. He may be, I may be wrong. He may be a corporate tool, but I just, the language he's using and the tone he's striking is very powerful. We had 69 deaths in California yesterday, bringing us to a total of 890. And then came my favorite part of the Gavin Newsom press conference, when one of the reporters, now, I don't know if you guys are watching these press conferences, but the California press conference, and I've seen some other states are doing this. The governor is speaking from an office, right? And reporters are online to ask questions. There are no reporters in the room. That's how they should be doing the White House press briefings. That's how they should be doing it. There should be no reporters in the room. They should all be calling in, same credentialed reporters, and there's one person moderating, and it's one question at a time. Now, that said, I like the way the reporters occasionally spar with the president, so I like having them there in person. But you don't need that sparring because Gavin Newsom and Eric Garcetti answer the fucking questions, and they answer the questions honestly, even when it's bad news. So this one reporter asks Gavin Newsom, points out that Obama, Warren, and Sanders have all endorsed Joe Biden, and asks Gavin Newsom if he's going to endorse Joe Biden, like his original candidate, Kamala Harris. Don't hold that against him. That's just politics. Has endorsed Joe Biden. So, like Kamala Harris, would he endorse Joe Biden? Endorse Joe Biden? And I thought, what a great question. And, he played it off and said that he hasn't had time to think about politics because all he thinks about is fighting COVID-19, which is a perfectly reasonable answer because he can't answer that question. He can't endorse Joe Biden right now when he's playing besties with Donald Trump. I mean, that's quite conspicuous, how much he's cozied up to Trump. And when I say cozied up, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean rhetorically. I think he's basically made a very smart decision as a leader, which is I need to get as much from this guy as I can possibly get from him. And the only way that's going to happen is if I say good things about him and I resist the urge to say bad things about him. And I think that is strategically the right approach. Um, and Gavin Newsom has been great at dodging political questions this entire time. So the U.S. naval ship Mercy has 7 COVID-19 patients, or had 7. They were taken away to a military base for quarantine, along with 100 more crew members who were also exposed to COVID-19. I did not see an explanation as to how that happened. The Mercy has not been needed in LA as much as expected, much like the Comfort in New York has not been used as much as expected. The Paycheck Protection Program has run out of money. I'm going to run out of weed. So thousands and thousands of businesses have been getting loans. The original $3.49 billion. I'm just going to guess that was what the number was. From the Treasury Department through the banks to small businesses, and they have to keep their employees on payroll. It has run out of money, and there are probably still many thousands of businesses in the United States that have not gotten relief money. So we now have a really big question to ask ourselves, which is, I mean, we ask ourselves as if we have any influence, but there are important questions to be asked, like, should the Democrats simply go along with funding another $250 billion for this program? First of all, why 250? Why not fund it to 500 billion? If you don't use it all, you don't use it all. Fine, but just fund it at a reasonable amount, because I don't even think 500 billion is going to be enough. I really don't. Whereas 4.23 trillion to big corporations and Wall Street, yeah, that's way more than enough. That's too much. So the Republicans want to pass a clean bill. Mitch McConnell wants a quick clean bill, just adding $250 billion to this single program. I got nothing against small business owners. I don't want anyone to lose their business. I think small business is great. I really do. For now. But at the same time, it's a big win for Trump, and it's not something that one should play politics with, except for the fact that it's also someone they shouldn't be playing politics with people who need direct cash payments. Steve Mnuchin said the $1,200 direct relief payment was substantial enough to get Americans through 10 weeks of the COVID-19 crisis. Come on. Just give me a break. Just give me a break. That's ridiculous. It's so absurd. They sound like such fools when they say these things. But that's corporate capture of the government, man. I'm going to skip talking about this whole it was created in a lab in Wuhan, China story, because frankly, I think it's a boring story. I wanted to open with this, but I didn't organize my notes correctly tonight, so I didn't open them to this. Mehdi Hassan on his podcast, Deconstructed, which I highly recommend. I think Mehdi Hassan's a terrific journalist, and he's a great interviewer. Although his Al Jazeera interviews are much more antagonistic than his Deconstructed Intercept interviews. But Mehdi Hassan was talking about, of all people, he was talking to Soledad O'Brien, who is a natural enemy of the Bernie bro. So I just put that disclaimer out there. But she was fine. She was criticizing the media and making good criticisms. So give credit where credit is due. But Mehdi Hassan joked about what he would ask Trump if he were in one of the press briefings. And he said that he would ask Trump, "What's your response to the president of Wakanda who has criticized your handling of the COVID-19 crisis?" And I thought that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Mehdi actually said that he thought Trump would start talking shit about T'Challa. I hope Mehdi wasn't implying that Donald Trump would actually know T'Challa's name. I don't think he would. I don't think, much like he would not know that Wakanda is not a real country. He would call it one of the S-hole countries. I think that's it for tonight. I'm adding. I don't know. I feel weird ending on someone else's joke. That feels like a strange way to end. One more story. The DSA tweeted on Sunday, so this story is a little bit late, but I've been wanting to mention it. The DSA tweeted on Sunday, "We are not endorsing Joe Biden." And a lot of people got butthurt about this, that the DSA is not endorsing Joe Biden. And so tons of Biden bros started going after all the red roses on Twitter. None of them came after me because I wasn't tweeting anything about it. But red roses, like myself, on Twitter, were getting attacked. And honestly, like, they're socialists. We are socialists. Bernie Sanders is the compromise candidate. Like, I literally believe in returning capital to the people, disaggregating capital. I think there is too much capital consolidation. So I'm talking about massive disaggregation of capital. That's what I personally believe in. And there are a lot of different ways to get there, and a lot of great left intellectuals like Richard Wolff talking about things like this. Like, Richard Wolff was talking about the unemployment crisis, and he was saying, Jesus Christ, we need millions of tracers. We need millions of testers. Let's put people to work doing the things that need to get done. There's a lot to do. There's kind of a crisis going on. And again, it's a very solid point. So there are a lot of great democratic socialist notions being talked about right now. And Bernie Sanders is not a democratic socialist. He is a social democrat. He does not believe in altering who controls the means of production. And that is one of the more fundamental things to the term socialist. That said, democratic socialist is also an extremely elastic term. And many of Bernie's programs are inherently socialist. If you look at the Green New Deal, that's eco-socialist, and I even think that label is maybe a label that we should be using more often. But the other thing, too, is the Democratic Socialists of America is only 56,000 people. If they're going to be so good at winning moderate Republicans and winning back women in the suburbs, then they certainly don't need 56,000 Democratic Socialists to vote for Joe Biden, right? I mean, I was told over and over again that if I don't like Joe Biden, I should vote for someone else. So, look, it doesn't matter who I vote for. I live in California, and California is going to Joe Biden. So there you have it. That is all I got for tonight. I don't have a good way to end the show other than I'm going to smoke one more time. Peace out. Stay home. Stay safe. Stay well. Solidarity.